While you're getting there, I want to remind you the 22nd that our service, there will not be service here. So if you come here, it'll be locked up, locked down. We won't be here. We're going to be at Pine Ridge, Hope's Lake at over here in the Muddy Pond area in Overton County. And that will start 10 o'clock. Bring your lawn chair. After the little service, the worship team will, as normal, lead us into some worship. And come dressed comfortable. If you plan on staying afterwards and enjoying whether the swimming or the fishing, you come dressed appropriately. You won't have to worry about the pastor. There's several ladies here and guys that if you don't, they'll help you get some appropriate attire on. And appropriate means appropriate. We want to be very respectful. But we're going to have a baptism afterwards. So if anyone desires to participate in that, you just need to get with me. This week on August 11th, there's two things that is scheduled to happen that day, and I want to bring to your attention because this can actually get out of hand if we're not very careful. It's according to the settings on your phone, but if your phone is set up to receive alerts, all alerts, which mine is, then likely you will get alert from the federal government on the 11th on an emergency broadcast. They're testing the emergency broadcast system, and so they're going to be sending it out via text message or not text, but however it is, it will come across on your phone. The reason I want to bring that to your attention, also scheduled that day, if they follow through with it, is there's a group, and I don't know if their agenda is good or bad, but anyway, there's a group that is asking people, school teachers, staff, and maybe even medical workers, healthcare workers to have a walkout in protest of the mandated vaccines. And I'm not here discussing that, but with emergency broadcasting going out and this going on, people could begin to get really fearful that something terrible is going on, not realizing that these are scheduled events. So I just want you to be aware that these are scheduled events, not necessarily anything is going to happen. But I'm also aware many times our lack of understanding of what's going on can cause an event. That we begin to think something is happening when it truly is not. So that is supposed to happen on August the 11th. Both of those events that day. Today we're going to look at, and by the way, we thank Jerry for getting our internet back up. We were down for about a month, so he came and the little smart aleck that he is, it took him about 30 or 40 minutes to get it up and going when I've been working on it for 3 and 4 weeks. So Jerry, right now you and I are just not talking for a while until I kind of get over it. But we appreciate him taking care of that for us. I'm not going to read, I think there's 58 verses in chapter 17. I'll touch on a few of those. But this event that the Bible is speaking of is one that is, whether you're the youngest or the oldest, you have heard the stories of David and Goliath. I mean, I don't know if there's an American that has lived here their entire life hasn't heard of the David and Goliath stories, whether you're a Christian or not. We that's the reason in sports, you know, you got a powerhouse and then you've got a Cinderella team, and it's always looked at as David and Goliath. So it's a very familiar passage. But I want to bring some points out. Number one, this man David is just a person as you and I are. We have a tendency to place these characters that we read about in the Bible like they're some kind of superhuman, and they are not. They are regular Joes just like you and I. David got up and he put his clothes on the same way that everybody in that era of time would have been putting their clothes on. We don't put ours on that day. He would have put on some kind of dress. You better not be putting a dress on if you're a guy. But we are... There's nothing special about David other than in today's world, he would seem like a rebel and a radical when it comes to the Word of God and his relationship with God. And it's one of the components in Christianity that has been forgotten. We have lost the desire and the love of God. We've lost the desire to work for Him, and when I say we, I'm never talking in absolute, but in generally speaking, and we've lost the love factor of that. We just can't fathom going a day without having communication with Christ. I mean, if we have no conversation, we treat as, well, I should have, but I didn't. And that's about as much remorse as we get out of that. Well, David would not have been that type of person, especially in this part of his life. So let's pick it up. Chapter 17, I'm going to start maybe with verse number, we'll go ahead and start verse number 2. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain, one on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. I think that equates to about 125 pounds for that particular item. And he had a bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Verse 7, now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield barrier went before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel, and he said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And when Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, I want to stop there. First thing, and I'll go back and forth of the courage and the cowardness. We got to understand that here you have David, this Jewish boy, short by nature, not a very big guy at all, and he is going to be stepping up against this guy that's close to 10 feet tall with all this massive armor. He was a veteran of war. He had trained and killed thousands of men, that the Bible calls him a champion. Now, there's no way in this world that David could look at that man and not be frightened. There's no way. But David was a man just like you and I. He had to have been frightened by what he's seen. But the difference is, I'm quite confident because of we can look back and read about the event, but David didn't allow that being frightened of this man or this situation rule him. Cause him to begin to make foolish decisions. And would cause him to succumb to the Philistine army or the Philistine government. I believe when David began to hear about these giants that were in the land, because I don't know if Goliath would have been the biggest man in the army. We know he had brothers. There was probably likely other men just as big and bad as Goliath. So we've got a whole army full of these really bad dudes. And we've got the nation of Israel over here, that the last verse I read, you said that they were cowering in fear. And I will tell you today what we have, in generally speaking, we have a church, you have a remnant that is willing to stand, but overall the church has lost its spine. We are afraid. Just like the rest of the world, we are afraid. And we're afraid of something we can't even see. And we're afraid of something that there's so much news on there and so much opposition. Even the experts can't even agree when it comes to this virus. Not only the virus, they can't even agree on the vaccine. And you even come inside the church, and the church sounds just as terrible as the world. We cower in fear. We're afraid. When is you know, I know all of us have seen the YouTube videos, and we've seen the news. I mean, you've got a person getting on an airplane that doesn't want to put a mask on, and we're fighting one another over a mask. God help us. God help us. Now, I'm not up here saying good idea, bad idea, and I've had, I don't know how many people ask me, Pastor, what do you think we should do about the vaccine? That has to be your personal choice, your personal opinion. I have never given, nor will I ever give anyone any advice on whether they should take this or not take this. There's people in this church that have taken it. There's people in this church that have not taken it. And I will stand and tell you this much. I won't stand here and govern the way Joe Biden did, our president, and say we've got a new pandemic, and that's the unvaccinated people in the United States of America. They ought to remove that man from office for that kind of statement. Whether you've taken the vaccine or not, that you should never agree to start dividing a group of people over things that it's our personal opinion on what we do or not do. And it's not right and left, it's not Republican, Democrat, it's just what's right and what's wrong. And you cannot get up there and start putting two people at odds against one another. I'm waiting to hear and see if the reason, if you notice, and I forget which, I believe it's in New York, but I can't remember. They show the video. This girl walks out, gun in her hand, not hiding nothing. This other girl not even looking at her, standing over, but apparently they'd been friends, walked right over to her, put the gun to her head and fired the gun, put the gun back in her purse, walked over, got in her car and drove away. All on video. Just happened. I'm telling you, when you start putting out messages that these people are causing you these kind of problems, then we need to expect stuff like that. Because you've got the most powerful person in the world telling you that this group of people is causing all of our problems. fear is driving this stuff. And again, whether you've vaccinated or haven't vaccinated, that doesn't give either side the authority to start attacking. If you've not taken it, it doesn't give you the right to attack the ones that have, and vice versa. Fear's driving this. Well, we're going to learn today from David that David learned many years ago in his life, I'm quite convinced, even though the Bible doesn't explicitly say this, but the world cannot contain the books of everything that's been said and done, even concerning the things of God. So because it's not written in the Bible doesn't mean that David didn't act like a human. Because I'm quite convinced David spent some time with God in prayer to get to the place where he was in his life. There's just no other way of getting there. And David got there, he was being prepared for the day that he would fight the giant. But whenever, as a shepherd boy, taking care of these sheep, sheep have to be protected and they have to be watched over, and David did a good job. And I'm quite convinced when he started hearing the news, because remember, David had 8 brothers, Jesse his dad, his 3 eldest brothers went on to fight. And this Goliath came out, and he cowered the entire Israeli army, and he was defying not only David's family, but also the nation that David loved, but more importantly, defying the God that he served. Now let me go to a little side note right here. I'm not military, never served the first man in military. I am a patriot. Believe it or not, I have took more tongue whippings from Christians because I stand and say I'm a patriot pastor. Don't care. Don't care who likes it or not. That's what you're going to get when you get me. I love this nation. And this nation's been very good to me, and it's been very good to you. And this nation has afforded an opportunity for us to even take the gospel to the entire world. So I am a patriot, and I love this nation. And so I can understand when David heard him defy the nation of Israel, it also began to upset him. Now, the sidebar that I want to talk about just for a moment has really not a lot to do with the nation, other than today there are so many Americans, they are fearful. And they're fearful of this one group of people, the Chinese. The Chinese. Because, China's the largest country in the world. And apparently, some people believe that their technology is far and above. Let me tell you, the Chinese have just stolen America's technology. But now we're hearing that China, their Navy is far superior to the American Navy. So I looked at their aircraft carrier, the ones that's getting all the attention, getting all the raves, and looked at different aspects of that vessel, and then looked at the Nimitz, the USS Ronald Reagan. I'm going to tell you something. That aircraft carrier in China would do well to last 1 hour with the USS Ronald Reagan. There's just no comparison. But we are being driven by fear. And we make irrational decisions. And we make even more irrational statements because of a fear factor. And Jesus warned us that we don't need to fear. That fear is not an attribute that He brings and gives to us. We've allowed Satan to come in and to interrupt our life and to get involved in our life and invoke fear into us so that we're fearful. And trust me, that will begin to spread like wildfire. It may have started with could we hold our own against China? And now we are fearful over a virus, and it didn't stop there. Now we're fearful over a vaccine. And we're making irrational decisions, and we're making enemies in these areas. And some of you might be thinking, well, I wonder if the pastor is vaccinated or not. You'll never know. You know why? Because it's none of your business. Amen anyway, preacher. Amen. Because you say, well, if you're not vaccinated, you might be infecting me. Well, now they're saying the vaccinated people may be the super carriers. See, you don't know who to believe. We can't be driven by fear, so we look at David here. David is getting ready to go against this, and I'm quite convinced while he's out there in the fields watching over the flock, that he's spending time with God. And then his father says, here, take this to your boy, take this food, this cheese, take all this stuff to your brothers and to the other guys in the army, and then come back and report back to me, Jesse is telling him, on what's going on. So when David gets there, he hears this man defying his family, his nation, and his God, and he gets very angry. I'm telling you, there needs to be some righteous anger gets up in the church today, because let me tell you something, the devil is making fun of our family, our nation, and he's sure defying our God. And the church doesn't care any longer. We need to start standing up. I'm telling you, Paul declares that we are in a battle. I'm telling you, as soldiers, we're looking to do something, to get involved, rather than trying to find a way to get away from it and get out of it and be protected and be safe. But that's the mentality. We want to get out of here in the rapture. We want to go hide from the virus. We don't want to have any problem in our life at all. If it's going to be a problem, we want to back away from it. When we've not even put it to prayer, because the very thing that we're backing away from may be the thing that God is telling us to walk to. That you may have the answer that we need. See, we all have something that we should be trying to do. That you might say, well, I'm not president, I'm not a state representative, I don't have a huge platform. Everybody has a part that they can play. If you're willing to listen and then to get up and start trying to put the very things that the Lord is beginning to birth in you into play. You know, years ago, I had to go against the grain and start preaching. There's something terrible wrong in the church. And then I started preaching there's something wrong in this nation. Our nation is falling. It's going under. And now we see what's happening. And then I started preaching the ABCs. I started preaching community. We got to have community. So I wanted to put together a group that we can learn how to be prepared physically, spiritually, emotionally. And then I wanted to get this group where we could communicate together. And I thought, finally, I've got that done. Then I can rest. I can stop. Well, lo and behold, that now the Lord's birthing in me that I've got to take this outside of our church. And I'm already talking to people about what I can do to make this a county-wide thing. And I'm quite sure if that ever happens, and it will, that it will no longer be a county-wide thing, but it'll be moved out to the Upper Cumberland. And somehow, because I'm going to tell you, community is the name of the game. We can't fight this on our own. The powers that be, when they begin to come after you and I, they're not going to come in swinging a sledgehammer. They're going to come in as meek as a lion. And as sly as an old fox. If you're much of age, you grew up singing some of these songs, the devil, he's a sly old fox. He'll come in and even our leadership, more than likely, if we're not very careful, will say, you know what, this is a good thing, and let's help try to bring the people on board with these ideologies. You know, they're in the middle of a gridlock down a huge amateur radio group. They're in the middle of a grid lockdown that they went into full lockdown, no power or anything, on Friday, and it'll end today about 2:00. And the purpose is they want to see how many people that they can get in touch with in case of a full-blown grid lockdown. I love the idea of having these mock drills to make sure that everybody is prepared, and that we can learn to work together and for the betterment of our nation, and of course the betterment of our constitutional rights. And the mock drill, I thought this was I don't know, maybe it was by design, but the drill is a cyber attack that hit, and it started on Monday, and by the time we got to Friday, it was a full-blown grid down because of cyber attacks. I believe it was in July that the World Economic Forum, who is the author of the Great Reset, which will happen at some levels, had their meeting with 27 different groups, and their goal, their practice was a cyber attack. And now we're seeing all these other things. So folks, we've got to be prepared and ready for anything that is coming. And with David here, see, he was ready for Goliath. He was prepared and he was ready. He no longer was concerned about how huge he was and how small, or how huge Goliath was and how small David is. But he had a goal, and I can hear David in my mind saying, Lord, open the door up so that I can go. Not, am I going to have to? I want to. I want to get my hands on this guy. You know, it's a kind of an opposite of the way we look at things today. What can I do to get involved to help change some things? See, when David got ready to go, he was met with 3 obstacles. So be prepared, because the devil don't give up that easy. Number one, the first doubt that he had to face is, and it's always the one closest to you, and that's your house, your family, your friends. They'll be the first one that will begin to cause the problem with you and cast the doubt. What did his brother say? Who are you? You are nothing but a shepherd boy. Who do you think you are? Going to come in here and go against Goliath? I mean, his armor 3 times your weight, just in his armor. Well, many of us would probably stop at that doubt. We just don't seem to be able to push through sometime. By the way, I was listening to this Christian comedian. I think his name is Jeff Allen. So maybe, guys, we need to listen to what Jeff Allen says. Whenever some problems came up in his home, he said, the first thing I did, he said, I got a hold of my wife. And he said, I told my wife, if you don't care, give me my spine back so that I can go and fight this battle I need to fight. So maybe we need to go to our wives and get our spines back, guys. We've given, we don't, the backbone we don't have anymore, so maybe we need to go get our spine back and then just buckle down and get ready to meet these problems face on. Not only wait for them, but we go and meet these things. But we meet them as the Lord directs on different things and strategies that you and I should be doing, that He's speaking to us. So David had his family. Well, he got past that. The next one that he that he had to fight with, and to me was his three greatest loves. And I just mentioned them. His family, now his nation. He went to King Saul. He said, Saul, I'll take care of that giant for you. He said, David, you're too little. You need to go home. You can't do this. And then when he convinced Saul he's going to, Saul said, well, at least let me put some armor on you. David finally had to shed that armor because he realized that wasn't what God had. He didn't call him to use his armor, because I'm going to tell you something. When this is said and done, the Lord wanted everyone to know without a shadow of a doubt this was God doing it, not the nation of Israel, nor David. So he got by that. So the next one was the enemy. Man, sometimes we think the enemy's the only one giving us the problem. No, we've got others giving us problems before we ever get to the enemy. So when he got to the enemy, you had the giant here bellowing out, telling him, who are you? This is an embarrassment to me. He said, but boy, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. By the time I get done with you, I'm going to feed you to the birds. Now, I'd probably been ready to run at that point. Especially, he said, you come at me with a stick? Have you lost your mind? A stick? What's wrong with you, boy? David, at this point, it didn't matter what anyone was going to say. I'm telling you guys, we have got to get enough courage and enough backbone and enough spine bones. It doesn't matter what the voices are yelling at us from the side. We are focused on the thing that God has called us to do. And today, if we do not step up and call the church back to the cross, we're going to see nothing but apostate church ruling and reigning all across the United States of America. It's no longer about even saving a nation. It'd be great if we could save a nation. But I'm telling you, we're losing a church. And it doesn't seem like it's bothering anyone. Is it going to have to come to Fentress County before we're going to actively get engaged? To the point that when you get off your secular job, you're immediately going to work doing the things God has called you to do. And if you say that God hasn't called me to do anything, if He hasn't, it's just because you're not listening, because I promise you He has called you. He's called every one of us to do something. And I'm going to tell you today, if we think that our call is that we just got to get people convinced that something's going on, the people are convinced. There is something going on. It's no longer the agendas are not hid. We hear them openly talking about the Great Reset. We hear them openly talking about the Agenda 21, the Agenda 30. We hear even Bill Gates talking about depopulation. We can pull up papers where Dr. Fauci said in 17 and in 19 in 2020 that we are surely to get some type of worldwide virus. And we've got to get ourselves prepared. And reports have been taken off Google and Facebook and all this if it doesn't line up with the agenda. Listen, I'm reading an article that was taken off the internet in 2019. This person just has it and takes it through their source. And it laid out 12 steps to a new world order. 12 steps. They wrote this, I'm assuming it was first printed in 18 or 19. I'm reading the article dated 2019. 12 steps. Step 1. Right on the money. Step 2, right on the money. 3, yes. 4, yes. 5, yes. 6, yes. 7, yes. 8. Every 8, the first 8 that they said was going to happen has happened. They weren't dealing with prophecy. They knew it was an agenda. All 8 have come to pass exactly as they said. And only line 10, 11, and 12 is left, 4 more left, to help get us into a new world order. And the reason I know it's going to happen because the Bible says this is where we are headed. We have to be working, getting as many people prepared and spiritually, emotionally, physically, so that when these things even are upon us even heavier than they are today, we're ready without a hiccup to continue with the message. Because guys, this is not about survival. This is not about trying to save anything. This is about continuing on with the message of the cross. No matter the circumstance, no matter the situation. I ask you, what is it in your life? There's got to be something in your life that the Lord is dealing with you on that helps give an answer to some of the things that we're facing. Something that you can do in your home that will, I promise you, will expand out of your home into our communities. And because there's other people, I guarantee you, that the Lord's dealing with probably in these same areas. But we're afraid. We forgot about how God miraculously delivered maybe yourself, or we know that if God hadn't have stepped up, that my child would be dead or my marriage would be over. We've forgotten what the power of God, and because fear makes us lose all of our senses. And now we're just reaching and looking for someone to take care of us, to keep us safe. When the Lord is saying that someone is already here. And His name is Jesus Christ. So, folks, we can't allow these things of the devil to divide us. He will take something, whatever it is, and he will cause division among a nation and among a church. The Bible is very clear that this type of division, this type of nation, home, church, with this kind of division, there's only one outcome, and that is fall. Destruction. It may not have visited this county yet, but it will if we do not get ahead of it. And I'm one that believes, because of our Constitution, the way it's laid out, with the conversation between Moses and Aaron, or Jethro, his father-in-law, where Jethro says, Moses, you can't attend to all these affairs. And he said, you need to go out and get you some men that you trust and that have wisdom. And you need to sign them to take these smaller matters, and you will hear the larger matters. I believe our government, from reading behind some people, they took that concept, and that's why we have state constitutions. We have states that can also be sovereign. That just because the federal government mandates, it doesn't mean that it has to be so. You know, again, we can't learn lessons. We see that the big debate going on in the Capitol is that the Supreme Court ruled that CDC cannot extend the order of not allowing the evictions, landlords to evict. And of course they passed it anyway, and some people say, well, how can they do that? The reason they did that, because the Supreme Court cannot make a law. They can make a judgment, and until someone challenges what they've done, they can do it. See, We've lost all concept of the way things work in this nation. We've lost the concept of things, how things work in God's world. The things that He will do and the things that He's not promised. And then, to be a David today would appear as a rebel and a radical. That's what we need. We need some Christians that have the courage of David to say, you know, I've listened to enough for this, and I'm going to stand, and I'm going to do what I can do. That may never make a world stage. It may not even make a local news. It does not matter. All that matters is that we are doing what God has called us to do. And as I get ready to close, Terry, if you and Christy want to come, as I get ready to close, I want to share this with you, just what little bit you can do. And many of you did it at my request. Probably most all of you did. With the ham radio. And we wound up getting about somewhere around 18 to 20 people. Doesn't sound like a lot of people to get their license. And now we've already developed a net to try to help build this communication. But do you know the ripple of what we have done, how it has reached out into the amateur radio world? That I can pick up a radio and listen to people in Chattanooga, in Oak Ridge, in Scott County, Morgan County, talking about what a church is doing in Fentress County. That cares enough for their people to make sure if something happens, at least we have an opportunity to help each other out. And not only that, and I do not want to embarrass anyone, but out of that, we even picked up James and Teresa that's sitting right here simply because they heard what we were doing here at this church. The ripple effects of just doing some things that God has birthed in us will begin to make some waves where it can even help bring some people in to help make this thing work even greater, because they are a God sent. I've been praying for somebody to fill a spot in Banner, somebody to fill this with a huge radio. And lo and behold, they walk right in our front door. We just have to have the courage to move forward, one step at a time, one day at a time. We can no longer sit back and be afraid because we're worried that something bad's going to happen to us. What happens to us will have to happen. But at least we can say it happened while I was doing the work of God.